Hello quad folks. Today I'm going to be removing the rear shelf on the old TR-70-B. What's a rear shelf? Well, it's this thing right here. Here's the rear shelf on a TR-70. And as you can see, this one here is really ratted out. It's got a lot of rust and a lot of rats have been in this thing. And you know, that's probably the two things that you don't want. You know, and of course, this rust and rats. And this one has had more than its share of both. So what I have to do is unsolder all these connections to from the wiring harness, and then remove the large parts. And then the actual shelf, or the piece of metal, is bolted underneath the frame, between the frame and the bottom of the back plane, which is the frame that holds all the sockets and the DC buses and the wiring ducts. So that's one unit. And the rear shelf in the front is screwed into the bottom rail for that back plane where the harness is. And so it's not exactly an integral part, but it's pretty close to it. You can take it apart, but it's a lot of work. But in this case, the only way to improve this, or to restore it back to its original condition, is to just take it out and start over. And maybe sanding or treating or painting or we may cut a whole new piece of metal to go in here, depending on just how much damage we have from the rats and the rust. Basically, the components are these are output capacitors for the video output and the processing amp, and then you have three transformers here. The first transformer is the capstan motor transformer. And this is between the output of the capstan power amp and the capstan motor. Then the next one we have here is the head wheel transformer, along with these three capacitors right here. And then the third one is the filament transformer for the record amps, which in this version were tubes, and also the new Vista preamps in the playback head amp. And so, you know, with all those tubes, you have a sizable 12-volt AC transformer. since I'm not going to be putting the record electronics modules back in when I rebuild this, it's going to be a play only. I could probably get by with a lot smaller transformer since we don't have all those record amp tubes to supply filament voltage to. I may or may not sub this out for something smaller. Just for the new Vista tubes in the preamp, those are not very, they don't draw a lot of current. In fact, on my 2000B, instead of using its AC power transformer, I opted to go with a 5-volt DC, a little Power 1 regulated DC power supply, which you can run it up to 6.3 volts with no problem. It's well within its range. And those things are much lighter, and they don't, generate as much heat as some of this older stuff does. And here we have a little rectifier board and some caps and some resistors, and this supplies a reference voltage to the servo, and it supplies voltage to the guide servo, and seems like it does one other thing. I can't think of what it is now, but I think there's 3 things that are connected to this little board, which there's not a lot going on, but that's the part right there that's really kind of worrying me, is some of these rusty places are really bad. Worse than the camera will show you. With your eye, it's a lot worse condition, but it's bad enough on camera. This little connector block here, now these things are voltage distribution blocks. I never was a big fan of these things. In fact, the last one that I had, I ripped it out and used just a screw down barrier terminal strip and just completely got away from that type of connection. The screw down barrier terminal strips are a lot more a lot better connection, especially when one of these things gets 40 or 50 years old and you have a bunch of rats living on it, then your connectivity is going to be a little bit iffy, just because of the corrosion and things that happen. So that's going to go away. I'm going to completely replace that, as well as we have another one down here beneath the panel, and that one I'm going to completely replace as well with a screw down barrier terminal strip. In the long run, that'll be a lot better connection. Okay, here we go. Okay, here we are the next day on the rear shelf removal, and we have all of our connections on top disconnected and all the transformers removed. So next thing we have to do is we have to go low, down under. So put us down a nice clean surface to get on, and looking up from below, we have some screws and bolts down the front and the back edge. There's one, and there's a screw there, and this is the AC power connector for the cooling blower motor, which would be sitting here and connecting into the air plenum through a little duct. And that motor also runs the vacuum pump, which is mounted on the opposite end of the shaft. So we have to disconnect the AC power leads from this little socket connector here, and there we have a little wire clamp that we need to disconnect, take loose to let these wires to the connector block get free. And there we have another bolt, and there's a screw, and there's one in the back. So we'll get started with that today. Okay, now we can see the full extent of the rat damage and what needs to be done. It's pretty rusty looking, but it's nothing that can't be repaired. And you know, I guess what the comment that I get a lot is, why would I go to this much trouble for one of these machines? You know, why not just make a parts machine out of this one and find a better one to restore? Well, I would like to do that, but if you can find a better one, show it to me sometime. The truth is, these machines have gotten so scarce. It's just to the point of non-existent now, and so you just about have to work with what you got, or what you can get, you know, and so that's what I'm trying to do here, is work with what I've got and fix it back up, restore it, you know, to the best of my ability that I can. And you know, this is pretty bad, but it's not that bad. You know, this is basically a flat piece of metal with one bend in it and some holes cut in it. So, you know, that's not too daunting of a task to remake this entire piece of metal. So, yes, it's bad, it looks bad, it is bad. Anytime you've got a lot of rust going on inside of a piece of electronic equipment is not a good thing. But it's nothing that can't be fixed, you know, with some time and effort. And so here we go. One more step down the way. But you know, where it counts is the wiring, you know, the wiring harness, the connections, the connectors, the sockets. All that is still in really good condition. It needs a good bath, you know, but otherwise it's, I haven't found anything chewed up in the wiring. And as far as the connectors and the connections, that's all gold. And this is not 2023 gold, this is 1970 gold. Very, very thick gold. You know, because this was built back when gold was, I think, about $40 an ounce before the 1973 oil embargo, when gold went to $300. So, you know, there's a lot of gold on these contacts, a lot more then than there would be now. So it's a very heavy, thick gold, and that's, you know, very much in its favor as far as electrically. But there is some rust in the frame that we're going to have to address and deal with. And there's some underneath the frame member here that was holding up the back, the rear shelf, and then right along the rear bottom frame rail for the cabinet, it's pretty rusty. Now this is back behind the air compressor compartment, and 70 also had a automatic valve to dump the air tank moisture, which the air tank would be located in that corner. It was a square tank, and so, you know, with the tank dump valves and the air compressor being here, then, you know, you would expect to get some moisture here, maybe by accidentally or on purpose, if something happened to the drain line and it started draining into the frame, which it looks like that's what has happened here. Is that hole has probably gotten clogged, or the drain line had been diverted and it started dumping moisture into the frame. So that's not good. But, you know, this is a thick steel frame, and if worst comes to worst, right here, there's no reason why that can't be cut out with a grinder and new metal welded back in. It's thick enough to do that. So even the worst part of the rust in the frame is not anything that you can't work with and either cut out and replace, or maybe grind it and put some rust stop on it and some rust inhibiting primer. So it does have some bad places we'll have to address, but it's nothing that can't be fixed in the long run. Well, thank you for watching this episode of this old TR-70, and so we'll continue working to bring this old beast back to life.